And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. Now I want you to notice something about the particulars about the herbs and the trees, those that have seeds. Now God never intended, even before the curse was put upon the earth, even before Adam sinned, God never intended for mankind to eat everything that grew. That was never God's intent. Why? Because we read here, and we're going to read some more, about that God made the herb that produced seed and the fruit that produced seed for man's meat, for man to eat. Anything that does not produce a seed, God didn't intend for us to eat, such as poison ivy, poison sumac. Those things were never intended for us to eat. There's arguments. Atheists say, well, it doesn't matter what you think. The Bible is clear that it tells us that there were particular things God said we were to eat in the herb field. Okay, there are certain things you need. If it doesn't produce seed, you should not put it in your mouth. Because some things, some flowers are extremely, extremely poisonous. Some just to the touch, they don't produce seeds. They produce flowers that produces pollen that bees take from one to the other and reproduces plants, but they don't reproduce seed. Now, verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs. You remember last week we talked about the zodiac, or what you look into heaven, astrology, and they look, and how did David know what was coming? How did all these prophets understand what was to be? The Bible said they were put there for signs, and they were put there all in particular places for particular reasons, and God would give understanding to men as they would study and look at them, and God would give them wisdom through that. They were made up there for signs. It wasn't an explosion, and they just happened to be where they are. The Bible said, and for seasons, and for days, and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light unto the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. People say, I don't believe that God created all them creatures in the sea. I believe that they evolved. And there's a good reason why people tend to believe that. Because God said that He created everything that is in the sea from the sea. It's all made from that. I believe that the fish, I believe that the crabs, I believe that those things which swim around in the sea were not made from the same things that man was made from. I believe that whatever God chose and however He chose it, that the Bible said that the fowl that floats above the earth was made from the sea. So man's going to look at that and say, well, this came from that, and this came from that, and that came from the sea. That doesn't mean evolution exists. It means that that's how God chose to create it. Notice, verse 21, and God created the whales, okay, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly. That right there proves they came from the sea. God used the things in the sea that He had put in the sea to make these creatures after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. A fowl, of course, is a bird, or a flying whatever creature. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, and let fowl multiply in the earth. You say, Brother Barrett, exactly how many whales did God create? 2. A male and a female. How many redfish did God create? 2. A male and a female. How many speckled trout? 2. Male and female. That's it. Of all the species, God made 2. What did He tell them? Be fruitful, multiply. Go have some babies. No curse. Nothing wrong with the earth, buddy. They could reproduce. You ever notice in the animal kingdom that there's a lot less stress, a lot less labor and pain that animals and creatures go through than humans to have babies? I mean, you go fish. Fish is swimming around, and she meets a boyfriend. They decide they're going to put a little place together, and they're going to have some babies. What happens? Well, she goes over there, and after a lot of time, he might make the bed, and sometimes she makes the bed where she's going to lay the eggs at, and this happens. And so what happens is she goes over there, and she just like a couple 100,000 eggs. You know those that put them out like that? Then what happens? Then the male comes and he, fertilizes it. So to them, it's like nothing. It's just what we do. There's no specific set time. I believe that there's a season for having those, just like we know about salmon and all kind of different type of fish, bass, redfish. They spawn at certain times of the year in the spring, which is a normal conception of life. So we look at that and we see, well, boy, she didn't look like she had any labor at all. And there she goes swimming off into the sunset, looking for your hook. You know, and different creatures. And we've had, most of us have been around aquariums if we hadn't owned them. And we've seen these things take place. We've seen little fish born. Doesn't look like she's struggling at all to have these little babies. I will tell you one thing. Even a woman with an epidural, you don't want to be too close to when she's having a baby. Until they deaden her, buddy, you don't want to be close. You don't want to have nothing to do with that. It's just a serious thing. I find it funny I don't have scars from when our kids were born. The only one that I remember not having anything too much to do with was the last one. My wife had a cesarean section. They wheeled her off into the room back there. I'm like, thank God I walked away today with all my skin on my arm. You know, and I didn't have to go through that. But notice what happened. The Bible said God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. Notice God blessed them. If God is going to bless a shrimp, He's going to bless you. Imagine God was looking after that shrimp. Say, hey, shrimp, multiply. Be fruitful. Fill up the sea. Imagine the sea filled with shrimp. Yeah, that's some good stuff. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. Verse 24, and God said, let the creature bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and the beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. Now God made those that creeped and walked on land. He made them from the land. How God did it, don't know. You're going to have to ask Him when you get there. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good. Somebody made a comment the other day. I was reading something somewhere, and they said we can prove that evolution is not real by this. If evolution would be real, women that are having babies, the females would be born with 3 arms. Because every woman that you've ever known wishes she had an extra arm. And if we could improve, they would be born with 3 arms. You know, an extra hand. I need a hand here. I'm sure by now that evolution process would have had sympathy on women and they would have a 3rd arm. I'm sure I would venture to say that if evolution were real, the evolution sympathetics would have at least had a woman, a baby girl, born with an eye on the back of her head. It's been said that women have eyes on the back of their head. Yet I've not yet seen one. But if evolution was real, I can promise you they would by now have them all the way around. That we would be able to see and know that no matter which way she was facing, she could see us, and it would keep us out of a lot of trouble, guys. So, everybody agree with that? Now the Bible said, notice this, that God saw that it was good. Notice that it all went after its own kind. In other words, through all the history of mankind, we've never seen a cow birth anything but a cow. Amen. Imagine if you could get a mixture of cow and pork together. Get the best beef steak with a little pork mixed into it. Man, that would have to be good. But it can't be done. You have to get a piece of the cow, you have to get a piece of the pork, and you have to grind it together. Then you can do it. One of the best things you could ever do is get you a garfish and you get the meat. You have to scrape it because it's got so much sinew in it. You have to take a spoon and scrape the meat and grind the meat and take it, and you can fry it, you can eat it, and it's okay. But it's not near as good as if you take some shrimp and grind it in there. Buddy, that'll make a good garfish patty. That's awesome stuff. And a lot of things are better when you mix something else in it. Just like deer meat. A lot of processed deer sausage also includes pork. Because the pork gives it flavor, it gives it fat, because deer meat has no fat in it. And you know, or very little fat. But notice here, in verse number 26, the Bible said, and God said, let there be man, right? Now I want you to notice the difference. In everything that God created, if you'll notice from verse number 3, He said, let there be light. In verse number 6, He said, let there be a firmament. In verse number 9, He said, let the waters under the heaven. Okay? In verse number 14, let there be lights. In verse number 20, let the waters bring forth. In verse number 24, let the earth bring forth. But in verse number 26, He said, let us make man in our image. Now the name God is a plural name. It means there's more to God than just one thing. There's more to God than just being God. He's God the Father, He's God the Son, and He's God the Holy Ghost. 3 persons in one. Now in all of these other things, everything was made after its own kind. There are 2 kinds of light. There's light and there's darkness. You say, Brother Barrett, there's fluorescent light. There's floodlight. There's neon light. Light is light. You can't classify it any other. There's dim light, bright light, and no light. You know, there's darkness and light. Even in the evening when the sun is going down, there's never a moment that you can flip your finger or flip a switch and say, darkness just got here. There's always even in the shadow, in the edge of the shadow, the light and the darkness kind of bump into each other. You notice that? I mean, we can flip the light off in here and say, whoa, it's dark, but just hold on a second. Your eyes will begin to focus, and any light in this room will begin to infiltrate in your eyes. And so everything that God made that way and never changed. There was no reason to make it any other way. But now the Bible said that God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them. Now he uses the word man, dealing with mankind. Dealing with the fact, and of course He said later on in there, He said that God made man and woman. In His image created He them. He made both of them. And it doesn't go until later on where He explains how He had made Adam and put him to sleep and then made Eve. And that's explained later. And that's not what I want to get into. But here's the difference between everything else that God made and making man.